The August sun hammered down on Camp Stockton like divine judgment, turning the Texas dirt into something closer to iron than earth. 134 women stood in formation, their tattered white uniforms stained yellow from weeks of salt water and fear. The command came in broken Japanese, each syllable dropping like a stone into still water. Stripped to the waist, all of you. Keiko Tanaka felt her breath stop. This was it. The moment every propaganda poster had promised. The moment their officers had warned them about. American soldiers were animals who would tear the clothes from Japanese women and laugh while doing it. Her fingers found the wooden charm in her pocket, the small carved fox from Fushimi Inari Shrine worn smooth by 3 years of desperate prayer. But when the tent flap opened and no American men emerged, Captain Sarah Mitchell stepped into the scorching light, flanked by 2 female medics in crisp khaki uniforms. No leering guards, no circling predators. Just 3 women carrying medical kits and clipboards, their faces set in expressions Keiko recognized from her own years working field hospitals in Shanghai. Sarah's voice carried across the silent formation, translated by a nervous Japanese-American corporal. This is a medical inspection for tropical disease control, required under Geneva Convention protocols for prisoner welfare. The examinations began. One by one, the women stepped forward. Sarah moved down the line with mechanical precision, her eyes scanning legs marked by insect bites, fungal infections, and deep bruises from sleeping on wooden planks for months. She made notes, applied iodine with steady hands, wrapped bandages where skin had split from malnutrition. She did not smile, did not speak beyond medical necessity, but she also did not mock, did not leer, did not allow any man within 20 feet of the examination area. When Keiko's turn came, Sarah's eyes met hers for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for Keiko to see something unexpected flickering there. Recognition, not of Keiko herself, but of what Keiko was. A nurse, another woman who had wrapped wounds and whispered apologies to men who would not live to see morning. The examination took 45 seconds. Sarah found 3 patches of fungal infection on Keiko's calves and made notes in precise handwriting. Treat with iodine twice daily. Keep wounds elevated when possible. The woman beside her was Emmy Nakamura, 25 years old but looked 40. The war had carved away everything soft about her, leaving behind someone who flinched at sudden movements and kept her eyes fixed on the ground. When Emmy's name was called, she did not move. Sarah looked up from her clipboard, waiting. The silence stretched like pulled wire. Step forward, please. Emmy took 1 step, then froze completely, her breathing shallow and rapid. Keiko saw it then. The terror in Emmy's eyes was not about the examination. It was about what the examination might reveal. Sarah approached slowly, the way one might approach a wounded animal. You are safe here. This is only a medical check. No one will harm you. Emmy's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Her hands remained locked on her skirt. Sarah waited 10 seconds, then 20. Then she made a decision that would change everything. She stepped back, made a notation on her clipboard. This prisoner is showing signs of severe dysentery. Examination postponed for 48 hours pending stabilization. It was a lie. Even Keiko could see it was a lie. But the medical officer simply nodded and moved on. Sarah caught Emmy's eye for just a moment. Something passed between them. Not quite understanding, but the beginning of it. Why would an American nurse protect a Japanese prisoner that night, lying under mosquito netting? Keiko heard Emmy crying in the darkness beside her. Are you hurt? Keiko whispered. The crying stopped. For a long moment, Emmy said nothing. Then in a voice so quiet, Keiko had to strain to hear it, she answered. Not yet. It means they will find out eventually. And when they do, I will be hurt very badly. Find out what Emmy turned her face toward Keiko in the darkness. What I wrote, what I saw, what I did. Before Keiko could respond, a sound cut through the night. American voices, footsteps on gravel. Then Sarah's voice, clear and firm even through the canvas walls. The prisoners need protein. Rice water will not sustain them through recovery. A man's voice responded, harder-edged. Supply lines are stretched thin, Captain Mitchell. These prisoners are fortunate to receive anything at all. Sarah's response came without hesitation. Sir, the Geneva Convention specifies minimum nutritional requirements for prisoners of war. Without adequate protein and calories, we will see deaths within 2 weeks. The man's voice turned cold. We are not here to debate international law, Captain. We are here to process prisoners and prepare them for repatriation. With respect, sir, keeping them alive long enough for repatriation requires feeding them properly. The conversation ended with the sharp crack of boots on gravel moving away. Keiko stared at the canvas ceiling. Sarah Mitchell was fighting for them, fighting her own superiors, risking her career to ensure Japanese prisoners received food after what Japan had done across China and the Pacific. While the next morning they were marched to the mess tent and handed tin plates piled with food that made several women gasp aloud. Bacon, real bacon sizzling and golden brown laid across scrambled eggs, so yellow they looked like stolen sunshine. Toast thick with real butter. Coffee that was actually coffee, black and bitter and strong. Keiko had not smelled bacon in 3 years. In Shanghai, meat had been reserved for officers. In the final months, meat had become a memory. Now here on a paper plate handed to her by a freckled American boy who could not have been older than 19 was more protein than she had consumed in a week. She picked up a strip of bacon. The grease glistened. The edges were crisp enough to crackle between her fingers. She took one bite. Salt, fat, the smoky char of meat cooked properly for the first time in living memory. The taste exploded across her tongue with such intensity that her eyes watered. She closed them, swallowed, and felt something inside her crack open just slightly. Across the table, Emmy sat frozen, staring at her untouched plate. "It is not poisoned," Keiko whispered. "They would not waste poison on prisoners. That is not why I am afraid to eat it." Later, Keiko would understand. For Emmy, accepting American kindness felt like betrayal. Every bite of bacon was an admission that everything she had been told was a lie, that the monsters were capable of mercy, and mercy was more terrifying than cruelty, because cruelty you could hate, but mercy demanded something far more dangerous: gratitude. And with gratitude came the question that could not be answered. If the Americans were capable of this kindness, what did that make the people who had told her Americans were incapable of any kindness at all? That afternoon, a jeep roared into camp in a cloud of dust. The man who emerged wore the insignia of a lieutenant, his uniform crisp despite the heat, his face carved into an expression of permanent dissatisfaction. Lieutenant Richard Caldwell. Keiko would learn his name later. Through the open window of the barracks, she heard fragments of his conversation with the camp commander. "I need clerks. Anyone who worked administrative roles in Manchuria. Takitai Kempetai. Anyone who handled records. Washington wants names, locations, documentation for war crimes, tribunals." Noble words. But something in the way Caldwell said them made Keiko's skin crawl. There was hunger in his voice. Ambition. This was not about justice. This was about advancement. She glanced at Emmy, who had gone very still, her face drained of what little color it had held. "What did you do in Manchuria?" Keiko asked quietly. Emmy's answer came in a whisper so faint Keiko almost missed it. "I wrote names." That night, under the mosquito netting, Emmy finally spoke. The words came haltingly, pulled from some deep place she had sealed off months ago. "I was a clerk, low level. My father was a translator for the civilian administration in Mukden. In 1943, they arrested him. They said he was sympathizing with Chinese civilians, giving them warnings before raids." She paused, her breathing uneven. "They told me if I worked for the Talkie Tai, they would release him. So I worked. I recorded names from reports, villages, occupations, numbers of people. I thought it was census data. Agricultural planning. I was 20 years old and stupid enough to believe what I was told. What happened to your father? He died in prison 3 months later. Pneumonia, they said. But I kept working because I was too afraid to stop. And then one night I saw them. Saw who the people, the ones whose names I had written. They were loading them onto trucks. Families, old people, children. I watched from my office window. The trucks drove away toward the north. They never came back. The silence that followed was absolute. How many, Keiko finally asked. I do not know. Thousands, maybe. I copied 300 village names before I stopped. I hid the papers in my father's house. Then the Soviets came and everything burned, and I thought the evidence was gone forever. She turned to face Keiko in the darkness. But it is not gone. I remember every name, every village, every date. And if that American lieutenant finds out I can recreate those lists from memory, I will never leave this camp alive. Keiko felt the weight of that confession settle over her like a physical thing. Emmy was not just a prisoner of war, she was evidence. Living, breathing, terrified evidence of crimes so vast that both sides would want her silenced. Keiko's hand found Emmy's in the space between their cots. She squeezed once. "You are not alone," Emmy squeezed back. "Will that be enough?" Neither of them knew the answer. But they held on anyway, two women adrift in a foreign land surrounded by enemies who fed them bacon and spoke of Geneva Conventions. The night stretched on, and in the medical tent, Sarah Mitchell sat alone writing a report about a prisoner with dysentery who showed no symptoms, wondering how long she could protect someone she barely knew from dangers she could not fully name. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had watched empires rise and fall. But for now, in this moment under Texas sky thick with heat in history, three women were making choices that would echo across decades. Choices about truth and lies, mercy and justice, survival and sacrifice. The war was ending. Surrender was inevitable. The Emperor's broadcast would come in days, but the hardest battles were just beginning. The second morning began with rain. Not violent tropical storms, but steady Texas drizzle that turned the camp into red mud and humid air. The women woke to the smell of coffee drifting from the mess tent, a smell so impossibly rich that several stood in the doorway just breathing it in. Keiko had slept poorly, her mind churning through Emmy's confession. 300 villages, thousands of people, names written in careful script by a frightened girl who thought she was saving her father. The breakfast bell rang. The women filed toward the mess tent, moving with the slow caution of people who had learned that sudden movements drew attention. The smell was overwhelming. Bacon again, but also something else. Pancakes, golden brown circles stacked three high butter, melting between the layers, syrup pooled in ceramic jugs that caught the light like amber. The freckled sergeant from yesterday was serving again. Danny Morrison, 19 years old, from somewhere called Iowa. "Ma'am," he said quietly as he loaded Keiko's plate. 3 pancakes, 4 strips of bacon, scrambled eggs. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. Respect. For a prisoner. For the enemy. Keiko ate slowly, savoring each bite while her mind raced. Across the tent, she noticed Danny watching the prisoners with guilt written plainly on his young face. These boys had not asked to guard women who looked like the enemy, but ate like the starving, who cried silently over pancakes because kindness was more disorienting than cruelty. She was still awake when the scream cut through the night. Not a scream of pain, a scream of discovery, of alarm. Keiko was on her feet instantly. Outside voices shouted in English. Boots pounded through mud. Flashlight beams cut crazy patterns through the darkness. Stay inside, a guard's voice. All prisoners remain in barracks. Through the canvas, Keiko saw a cluster of activity near the administration building. The answer came 15 minutes later when the camp loudspeaker crackled to life. "Attention all personnel. Security incident in progress. All prisoners are confined to barracks until further notice." The women exchanged frightened glances. Security incident could mean anything. Escape attempt, attack, discovery. It was not until dawn that they learned what had happened. All prisoners were to remain in barracks. Meals would be delivered. Then around mid-morning, Sarah arrived. She entered with 2 guards flanking her medical bag in hand, expression professionally neutral. She moved through the rows of cots, conducting brief examinations. When she reached Keiko and Emmy, she performed the same routine examination. But as she checked Emmy's pulse, she spoke quietly, her words meant only for them. "A courier was attacked last night. Military police courier carrying official documents to Manila headquarters. Concussion, but he will recover." She moved her stethoscope. The documents he was carrying were film canisters, identification photographs of all prisoners, for Red Cross documentation and repatriation processing. Keiko's stomach dropped. Those canisters are now missing. A full security investigation is underway. Every person in this camp will be questioned. Sarah moved to check Emmy's eyes, shining a small light. "I postponed your photograph yesterday claiming dysentery. That gave us 48 hours. We now have approximately 12 before Lieutenant Caldwell insists on completing the documentation process." She lowered the light and stepped back. Pulse and respiration normal. Continue current treatment. Protocol. Then barely a whisper as she turned to leave. We need to talk. Tonight. After lights out. Be ready. Someone had stolen the photographs. Someone who knew what those photographs would reveal. Someone who understood that once Emmy's face was in official records cross-referenced with intelligence files from Manchuria, her identity as a Tokeitai clerk would be confirmed. But who and for what purpose? To protect Emmy or to control her? The day passed with excruciating slowness. Through the canvas walls, Keiko could hear the sounds of investigation, vehicles coming and going, voices raised in interrogation. Lights out was called at 2100 hours. Keiko lay in the darkness waiting. The whisper came 2 hours later. Keiko Tanaka, Emmy Nakamura. Come to the entrance. Slowly. They moved through the sleeping forms of other prisoners, avoiding the creaking boards they had learned to identify. At the entrance, Sarah waited with Danny Morrison. The young sergeant looked terrified but determined. Follow me, medical emergency. If anyone asks, you are being treated for dehydration in the infirmary. They moved through the camp like ghosts. The medical tent was dark except for a single lamp burning in the back corner. Sarah gestured for them to sit. Danny took up a position near the entrance, keeping watch. We do not have much time, so I will be direct. She looked at Emmy. I know what you are. I have known since the first examination. The mark on your leg is a Tokeitai identifier. I served in the China-Burma-India theater. I saw those marks on clerks and low-level operatives captured during the Burma campaign. Emmy's face had gone white. Are you going to turn me in? That depends on what you did, on what you know, and on whether you are willing to tell the truth. Sarah pulled a chair close and sat down, her eyes level with Emmy's. Lieutenant Caldwell wants you because you represent a promotion. He does not care about justice. He cares about his career. She paused. I want you because I need to know whether my brother died for nothing. The silence stretched taut. His name was James Mitchell, private first class, captured at Bataan in April 1942. He died 9 months later in a camp near Cabanatuan. Dysentery officially, but the survivors who came back said it was really starvation and medical neglect. They said the guards would not give sick prisoners water. Sarah's voice remained steady, but Keiko could see the effort it cost her. So before I decide what to do with you, I need you to tell me the truth. What did you do? What did you see, and do you deserve the mercy I am considering showing you? Emmy sat very still. Then slowly she began to speak. The villages. I remember them all. Liaoyang, Tiling, Fushun, 300 in total. I processed the reports, recorded the names, watched the trucks leave at night. Where did the trucks go north? Toward the Soviet border. I never saw them come back. How many? Emmy's voice broke. I do not know the exact number. My list covered 300 villages. Average population 200 to 500 per village. Not all were relocated, but many were. She stopped struggling for composure. My father died 3 weeks after his arrest, but I kept working because I was too afraid to stop. I also started copying the lists. Every name, every village, every date. What? Because someone needed to remember them, even if it was only me. The medical tent fell silent except for the distant sound of generators and rain beginning again. Sarah stood and walked to the medical supply cabinet. When she turned around, her expression had changed. Not softened exactly, but shifted into something more complex. My brother was 20 years old when he died. He said the cruelty was not dramatic. It was small, constant. Death by 1,000 administrative decisions. She walked back to Emmy. So I understand what you are telling me. That evil is often bureaucratic. That genocide can be committed by clerks who think they are doing agricultural planning. She crouched down so she was at eye level with Emmy. But here is what I need you to understand. My brother is dead. Thousands of American boys are dead. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians are dead. And someone needs to answer for that. What are you asking me to do? Testify to the International War Crimes Tribunal. Tell them what you told me. Help them document what happened so that history cannot deny it. And if I do, then I will protect you. The Red Cross has authority to safeguard witnesses to war crimes. And if I refuse, then I turn you over to Caldwell and you become his trophy. Emmy looked at Keiko, her eyes pleading. Keiko reached out and took her hand. The people in those villages deserve to be remembered. Their names deserve to be spoken. If you are the only one who can do that, then perhaps that is why you survived when they did not. Emmy closed her eyes. Tears leaked from beneath her lids. I am so tired of carrying this alone. Then let us help you carry it. Emmy sat in silence. Outside, the rain intensified. Finally, she opened her eyes. I will testify, but I have conditions. Name them. First, you drop any charges against anyone who has helped me, including yourself. Sarah considered this. I will do what I can. What else? Second, my testimony goes to the International Tribunal, not American intelligence. I will not be used as propaganda. Agreed. And third, you promise me that when this is over, you will help me disappear. New name, new life. Sarah extended her hand. You have my word. They shook. Before anyone could speak further, Danny hissed from the entrance. Someone coming. 2 guards, heading this way. Sarah moved with practiced speed. She grabbed medical supplies from the cabinet. You onto the examination table. You look like you are having severe abdominal pain. You assist me. When the tent flap opened and 2 military police entered, they found Captain Mitchell examining a prisoner for acute dysentery symptoms while another prisoner assisted. Security sweep, Captain. As you can see, I am treating a medical emergency. This prisoner requires immediate care for severe dehydration. The MPs exchanged glances, then retreated. Carry on, Captain. When they were gone, Sarah let out a slow breath. That will not work twice. We are running out of time. She turned to Danny. I need you to do something that could get you court-martialed. Ma'am, I need you to forge transfer papers. Say that Emmy is being moved to the field hospital in Tacloban for emergency surgery. Ma'am, that is falsifying military documents. Yes. It is also the only way to get her out of this camp before Caldwell forces the photograph issue. Danny looked at Emmy, pale and shaking. He looked at Sarah, his commanding officer, asking him to break the law. What happens if we get caught? Prison. Dishonorable discharge. And if we do not get caught, then an innocent woman might live long enough to tell the truth. Danny stood there, 19 years old, holding the weight of a moral choice he had never expected to face. Then he squared his shoulders. I will need access to the administration building, official letterhead, a typewriter, in about 3 hours. Sarah nodded. But Danny, if this goes wrong, I will take full responsibility. Ma'am, with respect, if this goes wrong, we are all facing the same firing squad. Might as well face it together. He moved toward the tent entrance, then paused. My brother Tommy came home weighing 90 pounds. He still will not talk about what happened in that camp. But sometimes at night I hear him crying, and I think if someone had shown him mercy, maybe he would not wake up screaming. He disappeared into the rainy darkness. Sarah turned back to Keiko and Emmy. Tomorrow night we move. Be ready. Pack nothing. And pray that whoever stole those photographs is not planning to use them before we can get you out. She began gathering the medical supplies. One more thing. When I was in China, I let a Japanese prisoner die because I was following orders. I gave him nothing. Not water, not morphine, not even the dignity of a kind word. She met their eyes. 3 months later, I learned my brother had died the same way. Thirsty, in pain, alone. Her voice remained steady, but her hands shook slightly. So when I say I am protecting you, understand that I am also trying to save something of myself. Something I lost when I chose regulations over humanity. She turned away. Now go. Back to your barracks. Move quietly. And trust no one except each other. Keiko and Emmy slipped into the night. As they approached the barracks, Keiko saw a figure standing near the entrance, watching. When the lightning flickered, she caught a glimpse of the woman's face. Hana Yoshida, 29 years old, former nurse. Always watching, always silent. Their eyes met for just a moment. Then Hana turned and walked away into the darkness, and Keiko felt the first cold touch of real fear. Because the enemy within was always more dangerous than the enemy outside the wire. And time was running out. The rain stopped before dawn. Keiko woke to the sound of boots on gravel and raised voices. Through the gap in the canvas, she saw military police moving in between buildings with purposeful speed. More of them than yesterday, and now they carried weapons openly. Beside her, Emmy was already awake, staring at the canvas ceiling. They are looking for something, or someone. The morning announcement came earlier than usual. All prisoners will remain in barracks until further notice. Breakfast will be delivered. There will be no outdoor activities today. Around them, women began stirring, confused and frightened. Questions flew in rapid Japanese. Keiko said nothing. In a place like this, information was currency. Breakfast arrived an hour later. The food was the same, but it tasted like ash in Keiko's mouth. Emmy did not even pretend to eat. Around mid-morning, the tent flap opened, and Sarah entered with 2 guards flanking her. Her face was professionally neutral, but Keiko had learned to read the small signs. The tightness around her eyes. The way she held her medical bag with both hands. Something had changed. Something bad. When Sarah reached Keiko and Emmy, her movements slowed almost imperceptibly. As she checked Emmy's pulse, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. They found the courier. He regained consciousness this morning. He did not see his attacker clearly. But he remembers the build. Small, slight, almost certainly female. Keiko's breath caught. They are now operating under the assumption that the thief was a prisoner. Every woman in this camp will be questioned individually. Starting this afternoon, Sarah wrapped the blood pressure cuff around Emmy's arm. Lieutenant Caldwell has requested permission to use enhanced interrogation techniques. The camp commander denied the request, but Caldwell is pressuring headquarters in Manila. We have less time than I thought. Tonight may be too late. She removed the cuff and made notes on her clipboard. Be ready at 1400 hours. Medical evaluation for suspected tuberculosis. You will both be transferred to the isolation ward for testing. The isolation ward is a tent on the eastern perimeter. Minimal guard coverage. Danny will have a vehicle ready. What about the transfer papers? Danny finished them 3 hours ago. They look authentic enough to pass casual inspection. But if anyone checks with headquarters, the lie falls apart immediately. So we are betting everything on no one checking. We are betting everything on moving fast enough that checking becomes irrelevant. 1400 hours. Be ready. After she left, Keiko and Emmy sat in tense silence. Is it worth it? Keiko asked suddenly. All of this, the risk, the testimony, becoming a permanent ex-twin, is the truth worth losing everything? Emmy was quiet for a long time. I used to think the worst thing I had done was writing those names. That guilt was enormous, crushing. She picked at a loose thread on her uniform. But then I realized something worse. If I stay silent, if I let those names be forgotten because speaking them is too dangerous, then I become complicit all over again. Then those people disappear twice, once into the trucks and once into the silence of history. Her voice was steady now, strengthened by certainty. So yes, it is worth it. Because the alternative is becoming the thing I hate most. A person who chose safety over truth, survival over memory. Keiko reached out and took her hand. Then we make sure you live long enough to speak. The afternoon crept toward 1400 hours with agonizing slowness. Keiko watched the shadows shift across the tent floor, marking time. At 13:55, Sarah appeared at the entrance with Danny and another soldier. All 3 carried medical equipment. Tanaka Keiko and Nakamura Emmy. Medical transfer for tuberculosis screening. Gather your personal effects and come with us. The other prisoners watched with worried expressions. Tuberculosis was terrifying. To be isolated for testing meant serious concern. They followed Sarah and the soldiers out into the afternoon heat. The isolation ward was exactly where Sarah had described, a single tent on the eastern edge of camp, separated from the main compound by 50 yards of open ground. Inside, Danny had prepared everything. 2 cots with rumpled sheets, medical charts, a portable x-ray machine. Sarah checked her watch. We have approximately 30 minutes before the shift change. She pulled back a section of canvas at the rear of the tent, revealing a gap in the perimeter fence. Not large, but big enough for a person to squeeze through. Danny will drive you to the motor pool. There is a supply truck scheduled to leave for Tacloban at 14:30. What about you? I will remain here and maintain the fiction of your isolation for as long as possible. When the deception is discovered, I will claim you overpowered me and escaped. They will court-martial you. Yes, probably. Then come with us. Sarah shook her head. I am an officer in the United States Army. I do not run. I face the consequences of my choices. Before anyone could respond, a sound cut through the afternoon stillness. Boots, multiple sets, running. Danny moved to the tent entrance and looked out, then turned back with fear stark on his young face. MPs, 6 of them. Heading this way. Caldwell is with them. How much time? 2 minutes, maybe less. Sarah made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. Danny, get them out through the fence now. Do not wait for the truck. Get them into the tree line and keep moving east. There is a road 3 miles out. Flag down any civilian vehicle and get to Tacloban by any means necessary. Ma'am, what about you? I will delay them. Now move. Danny grabbed Emmy's arm. Keiko moved to follow, but Sarah caught her shoulder. When you get to Tacloban, find the Red Cross office. Ask for Margaret Chen. Tell her I sent you. Tell her the sparrow flies at dawn. Keiko nodded. Thank you for reminding me what mercy looks like. I had forgotten. Then Sarah released her and turned toward the tent entrance, straightening her uniform, composing her face into professional neutrality. Keiko squeezed through the fence gap, ignoring the way the wire tore at her skin. Emmy was already through, crouched in the tall grass. Danny came last. Behind them, they heard voices. Captain Mitchell, I have reports that you are harboring prisoners in this isolation facility without proper authorization. I am conducting medical evaluations under my authority as senior medical officer. I will need to verify that personally. Sir, entering an isolation ward without proper protective equipment violates health protocols. I am willing to take that risk. Keiko, Emmy, and Danny had reached the tree line. They crouched there watching. The tent flap opened. Caldwell entered, followed by 4 MPs. There was a moment of silence. Then Caldwell's voice again, sharp with anger. Where are they? I do not understand the question. Sir, the prisoners, the 2 women who were transferred here, they are receiving x-rays in the medical tent. I sent them back 15 minutes ago when the portable machine malfunctioned. That is a lie. Sir, if you are accusing me of falsifying medical reports, I suggest you put that accusation in writing through proper channels. The next sound was unmistakable. The metallic click of a pistol being drawn. Danny tensed beside Keiko, his hand moving toward his service weapon. Keiko grabbed his wrist and shook her head sharply. They could not help Sarah now. Captain Mitchell, you are interfering with a military intelligence operation. That is grounds for arrest and court-martial. I am ordering you to tell me where those prisoners have gone. Sir, I have no information to provide. If prisoners have escaped from this facility, then I was clearly overpowered and unable to prevent their departure. I recommend you organize a search immediately. Silence. Heavy and dangerous. Sergeant placed Captain Mitchell under arrest. Charge her with aiding enemy prisoners in obstruction of military justice. Confine her to the stockade pending court-martial proceedings. The sounds of Sarah being taken into custody carried across the distance. The click of handcuffs. The scuff of boots on dirt. We need to move. Now. They pushed deeper into the scrub, moving as quickly as they dared. Behind them, more voices were being raised. Orders shouted. The sound of vehicles starting. The hunt had begun. Danny led them east. After 15 minutes, they reached a dry creek bed and followed it north. Emmy was struggling, her malnourished body not built for this kind of exertion. Keiko stayed close, ready to catch her if she fell. How far to the road? Another 2 miles, maybe more. And if we cannot find a vehicle, then we walk to Tacloban. 20 miles. We can make that in 2 days if we have to. They kept moving. The afternoon wore on. The thunderheads finally opened up, rain falling in sheets that soaked them within seconds, but also covered their tracks. Danny found the road just before dusk. It was barely more than a dirt track, rutted and overgrown, probably used by local farmers. They crouched in the drainage ditch beside it, watching and waiting. Emmy was shivering now, soaked and exhausted. Keiko wrapped her arms around the younger woman. 30 minutes passed. No vehicles. Then in the distance, the sound of an engine. Danny tensed. Stay down. Let me check first. A truck appeared around the bend, an ancient flatbed loaded with hay bales. At the wheel was a man in his 60s, weathered face shaded by a straw hat. Danny stood up and stepped into the road, waving his arms. The truck slowed, then stopped. The driver leaned out the window, eyes narrowing. You lost son, sir. I need your help. These 2 women are nurses, Filipino. They were working at the army camp and there was an incident. They need to get to Tacloban, to safety. The driver looked past Danny to where Keiko and Emmy crouched in the ditch. Those do not look like Filipino nurses to me, look more like Japanese prisoners. The silence that followed was absolute. The driver spat tobacco juice onto the ground and sighed. I was in the first war, the big one, France. Saw enough killing to last 10 lifetimes. When I came home, I promised myself I would not participate in any more suffering and if I could help it. He pushed open the passenger door. Get in, all of you. I will take you as far as the crossroads. After that, you are on your own. Why would you help us? Because you are just kids, all of you. And kids should not have to run through the rain because old men started wars they could not finish. Now get in before I change my mind. They climbed into the cab. The driver put the truck in gear and started moving. What is your name, sir? Better you do not know. Better I do not know yours. That way, when they come asking questions, we can all tell the truth. We are just strangers who shared a ride in the rain. He drove in silence for 20 minutes. Then he pulled off onto a side road and stopped. Crossroads is a mile ahead. You can walk it. There is a bus stop there. Bus comes through at 0700 tomorrow, heading south. Driver is a fellow named Martinez. Tell him Frank says you are all right. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded $20 bill. For food, for tickets, for whatever you need. Sir Danny started, but the driver cut him off. I do not want to know. Just take it and go. They climbed out into the rain. The driver started to pull away, then stopped and leaned out the window. Hey kid, whatever you did, whatever this is about, I hope it was worth it. Danny looked at Emmy shivering and exhausted, carrying the weight of 300 village names in her memory. Yes, sir, it was worth it. The truck drove away, taillights disappearing into the rain and gathering darkness. They walked the last mile in silence, arriving at the crossroads just as full night fell. There was a small shelter there, barely more than a roof and a bench. They huddled together. Emmy fell asleep almost immediately, her head on Keiko's shoulder. Danny kept watch. Keiko sat in the darkness and thought about Sarah, about a woman who had lost her brother to Japanese cruelty and still chose mercy over revenge. What made a person capable of that kind of moral courage? Danny, she said quietly, why did you help us? Really, Danny was quiet for a long time. My brother came home from that camp weighing 90 pounds. He will not eat rice anymore. Sometimes I hear him crying in his sleep, begging for water. He wiped his eyes, and I thought if someone over there had shown him mercy, maybe he would not wake up screaming every night. He looked at Emmy sleeping peacefully. So I guess I helped her because I could not help him. And maybe that is selfish. Maybe that is just me trying to save my brother 3 years too late. But it is the truth. Keiko reached out and squeezed his shoulder. It is not selfish. It is human. And humanity is what saves us when everything else fails. They sat together through the long night, 3 people from 3 different worlds brought together by war and bound by the fragile hope that mercy might mean something after all. The rain continued washing the world clean, erasing tracks. And somewhere behind them, Sarah Mitchell sat in a military stockade, knowing that every hour she delayed the investigation was another hour her prisoners had to escape. She did not regret it. Even knowing the cost, she would make the same choice again. Because some things were worth more than safety. Some truths were worth protecting, even at the price of everything you had built. And mercy, real mercy, was not the absence of justice. It was justice tempered by the recognition that we are all in the end just human beings trying to survive in a world that demands we choose between what is right and what is easy. Sarah had chosen right, and now alone in the darkness of her cell, she waited to see if that choice had been enough. The bus arrived exactly when the farmer had said it would. The driver was indeed named Martinez, a compact man with kind eyes who asked no questions when Danny mentioned Frank's name. The ride to Tacloban took 4 hours. Emmy slept through most of it. Keiko watched the Texas landscape roll by and wondered if she would ever see home again. The Red Cross office in Tacloban was a converted storefront on a dusty street. Inside, a woman in her 50s sat at a desk piled high with paperwork. Can I help you? Keiko stepped forward. We are looking for Margaret Chen. Sarah Mitchell sent us. She said to tell you the sparrow flies at dawn. The woman's expression changed instantly. She stood up and without a word locked the front door and pulled the shades. Come with me. She led them through a back room and down a narrow staircase into a basement that smelled of old paper. I am Margaret Chen, and if Sarah sent you with that phrase, then you are in trouble so deep that normal channels will not help. She looked at Emmy with sharp, evaluating eyes. You are the Takatai clerk, the one who remembers the villages. How did you know? Because Sarah and I have been planning for this possibility since the day she confirmed your identity. She gestured to chairs around a battered table. Sit. Tell me everything, and then we will figure out how to keep you alive long enough to matter." So they sat in that basement room and Emmy began to speak. She spoke of Mukden and trucks loaded with families and 300 village names that haunted her sleep. She spoke of her father's death and her own cowardice and the terrible weight of knowledge. Margaret Chen listened without interruption, taking notes in precise shorthand. When Emmy finally finished, the older woman sat back. "Do you understand what you are offering to do? Testifying will mark you forever. You will never be safe in Japan, never be fully trusted in America. You will exist in the spaces between countries, between languages, between the person you were and the person you will become." "I understand. And you are willing to accept that." Emmy met her eyes steadily. "The people in those villages did not get to choose. They did not get to weigh the case. They simply disappeared. If remembering them cost me everything, then that is a small price compared to what they paid." Margaret Chen nodded slowly. "Then we will make this happen. But it will take time. We need to coordinate with the International Tribunal. Need to ensure your testimony is documented properly." She looked at Danny. "You need to go back, face whatever comes. If you run, you destroy any credibility we might have." Danny's face went pale, but he nodded. "Sarah will need someone to corroborate her story, someone to testify that she was coerced. Can you do that?" "It would be a lie, yes, but it would be a lie that might save her life. Can you live with that?" Danny looked at Keiko and Emmy. "Yes, I can live with that." He stood up, straightening his uniform. "Tell Sarah that some of us still believe mercy matters, even when it costs everything." Margaret Chen smiled faintly. "I will tell her. Now go." After Danny left, Margaret took Keiko and Emmy to a safe house on the edge of town. Small, clean, secure, unknown to military authorities. "You will stay here while we arrange the testimony. Do not leave. Do not contact anyone." "For how long?" "As long as it takes. Days, weeks, maybe longer." And Sarah Margaret's expression softened slightly. Sarah made her choice. Now we honor it by making sure it was not in vain. That night, alone together, for the first time in days, Keiko and Emmy sat at the small kitchen table and simply breathed. "Do you think she will be all right?" Emmy asked. Sarah Keiko thought about the woman who had protected them at the cost of everything. "I think she will survive, because people like Sarah do not break. They bend, they endure, and they carry on because the alternative is becoming the thing they fight against." She reached across the table and took Emmy's hand. "And we will survive too, because we owe it to her, and to the people whose names you carry, and to the possibility that truth might actually matter in a world that seems determined to bury it." Outside, the Texas night was vast and dark. Inside, two women held hands and chose to believe that mercy was more than just weakness wearing a kinder name, that it was in fact the strongest thing human beings were capable of. And that belief, fragile as it was, would have to be enough to carry them through whatever came next. The weeks that followed blurred together, days marked only by the changing quality of light through windows Keiko and Emmy were forbidden to approach. Margaret came and went, bringing food news and increasingly complex legal documents that Emmy signed with shaking hands. Sarah's court-martial had been scheduled for October 15th. Danny had returned to Camp Stockton and told exactly the story they had agreed upon. Captain Mitchell coerced him, threatened his career. He had no choice. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East had convened in Tokyo on September 3rd. Margaret had secured Emmy a place on the witness list for late October. Keiko spent those weeks watching Emmy practice. Every morning, the younger woman sat at the kitchen table with paper and pencil, writing village names from memory. Liaoyang, Tieling, Fushun, Bengsi, Anshan. 300 names, each one a place where families had lived until the trucks came. "Do you think anyone will believe me?" Emmy asked one evening. Keiko looked up from the shirt she was mending. "I think that belief is less important than record. Once your testimony is documented, it exists. It cannot be undone. Whether people choose to believe it or not, the truth will be there waiting for the moment when they are ready to hear it." On October 20th, Margaret arrived with news that changed everything. The tribunal has agreed to hear Emmy's testimony on November 2nd. She will be granted witness protection status under Red Cross jurisdiction. After she testifies, we have arranged for her to be transported to a resettlement facility in California under a new identity. Keiko felt something tighten in her chest. Emmy was leaving. What about Keiko? Emmy asked, her voice sharp with panic. That depends. Keiko, you have committed no crimes. You are free to return to Japan whenever you choose. Or you could come to California as well. Keiko shook her head slowly. I need to go home. There are things I must know, answers I must find. She thought of her father, of the questions that had haunted her since the day Emmy first mentioned Manchuria. The journey to Tokyo took 3 weeks by military transport ship. Keiko traveled as a repatriated prisoner. Emmy traveled separately under guard, her identity already beginning to dissolve into the fiction that would protect her. They said goodbye in Margaret's office the night before departure. Will I see you again, Emmy asked. I do not know, but I will think of you every day. I will wonder if you found peace. Emmy's eyes filled with tears. Peace feels impossible, but maybe someday I will find something close to it. They embraced, two women who had survived by holding on to each other in the darkness and now releasing their grip to face separate futures. Remember their names, that is the only thing that matters now. I will never forget. Tokyo in November of 1945 was a city of ghosts. American bombers had reduced whole neighborhoods to ash and rubble. Survivors moved through the ruins with blank expressions. Keiko walked streets she barely recognized. Her family home had been destroyed. The neighbors who might have remembered her father were gone, scattered or dead. She took work as a midwife's assistant, helping deliver babies in makeshift clinics. The work was familiar grounding. Bringing life into a world that had specialized in death felt like a kind of redemption. The letter from Margaret arrived on November 10th. Inside, brief and to the point. Emmy had testified on November 2nd. 5 hours of testimony. 317 village names. Dates, locations, methods of removal. Her words had been recorded, transcribed, entered into official record. The tribunal had been Zhenhan. Emmy's testimony corroborated reports from Chinese survivors. Several high-ranking officers were now facing additional charges. Emmy had been transported to California under the name Emily Nakano. She was safe. She was alive. And there was something else in the envelope, something Margaret had debated sending, but ultimately decided Keiko had the right to see. A document, typed on official letterhead. A list of names under the heading, Administrative Personnel, Mukden District Operations, March 1942 through August 1943. Keiko's hands trembled as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned down, past names she did not recognize, past titles and dates, and there halfway down the second page, Tanaka Hiroshi Administrative Liaison, Mukden District, April 1942 to April 1944. Status deceased inside Soviet advance, April 18, 1944. The paper slipped from her fingers, drifting to the floor like a falling leaf. Her father had not been missing. He had been there, in Mukden, working in the same district where Emmy had kept her records. Perhaps in the same building. Perhaps signing the same reports. And when the Soviets came, when the truth could no longer be hidden, he had chosen death over facing what he had done. Keiko sat very still, listening to the sounds of Tokyo rebuilding itself outside her window. Hammers on wood, voices calling, the stubborn insistence of life continuing. She thought about Sarah Mitchell, who had lost her brother to Japanese cruelty and still chose to protect Japanese prisoners. She thought about Danny Morrison serving pancakes to the enemy because someone somewhere might have shown his brother the same kindness. She thought about the old farmer who had driven them through the rain because he had promised himself he would not participate in suffering. And she thought about mercy, not the soft, easy mercy of forgiveness, but the hard, necessary mercy of choosing truth over comfort. She picked up the document from the floor, smoothed it carefully, folded it with precision. Then she put on her coat and walked to the Tokyo War Crimes Documentation Center. The building was gray concrete, institutional and cold, but the woman at the desk had kind eyes. I have something to contribute to the record. What kind of record? The truth. About Manchuria, about the villages, about the people responsible. So Keiko did. She told them about Emmy Nakamura, the clerk, who had copied 300 village names. She told them about the document Margaret had sent. She told them about her father, Tanaka Hiroshi, whose name appeared on that list of administrative personnel. She gave them everything, holding nothing back, even though each word felt like a betrayal of the man who had taught her to write her name, who had carried her on his shoulders through the shrine gates, who had kissed her forehead the day he left for Manchuria and promised to return. When she finished, the woman looked at her with something like wonder. You understand what this means? Your father's name will be in the permanent record. Anyone who researches these events will see it. I understand. And you are willing to accept that I am willing to accept the truth, whatever it costs. The document was archived on November 20th, 1945. Keiko's father would not be remembered as a hero or a victim. He would be remembered as what he was, a man who made choices, who participated in atrocities through administrative efficiency, who eventually could not live with what he had done. It was not the legacy Keiko would have chosen for him, but it was the truth. And the truth mattered more than comfort. The years passed in increments of small redemptions. Keiko married in 1948 a doctor who understood grief. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Neither knew their grandfather's name appeared in war crimes documentation. Keiko worked as a midwife, bringing approximately 3,000 babies into the world between 1946 and 1982. Each birth felt like an answer to the deaths her father had facilitated. The letter arrived in April of 1960, inside a single page from Sarah. I am coming to Tokyo in May for a military advisory conference. I would very much like to see you. There is a coffee shop near Ueno Station called Café Lumière. I will be there on May 15th at 2 o'clock. The court-martial ended with a reprimand and demotion. I served out my time and retired as a major. Danny testified on my behalf. He is well, married, 3 children. Emmy writes to me occasionally. She owns a tailor shop in Sacramento. She is as well as someone carrying that weight can ever be. I hope you found what you were looking for when you returned to Japan. I hope it did not destroy you, Sarah. On May 15th, Keiko told her husband she had an errand in the city. Café Lumière was small, quiet, the kind of anonymous urban space where complicated conversations could happen without drawing attention. Sarah was already there when Keiko arrived. 15 years had changed her. Gray threaded through her hair now. Lines marked her face. But her eyes were the same, clear, direct, unflinching. They looked at each other across the small table for a long moment. Then Sarah stood and Keiko stood, and they embraced like survivors who had washed up on different shores and never expected to meet again. When they finally sat, Sarah ordered coffee for both of them. You look well. So do you, for someone who sacrificed her career. Sarah smiled faintly. I sacrificed a rank, not a career, and I gained something more valuable, the ability to look at myself in the mirror without flinching. The coffee came. They drank in silence. Did you find what you were looking for? Sarah asked. When you went home, I found the truth about my father. He was in Manchuria, working in the same district where Emmy kept her records. His name is in the official documentation now, listed among those responsible. Sarah's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. I am sorry. Do not be. It is what I needed to know, even though the knowing was worse than any imagining. She picked up her cup again. I archived the documents myself. Put his name in the permanent record. Some people would say that makes me a traitor to his memory, but I think it makes me his daughter, because he chose truth in the end too, even though the truth killed him. Sarah reached across the table and took Keiko's hand. You did the right thing, the hard thing. Those are usually the same. They sat like that for a moment, 2 women who had met as enemy and protector and become something else entirely. Emmy as well as someone can be who carries 300 ghosts. She works hard, keeps to herself mostly. But she writes to me every few months. Always the same message, essentially. She is still here, still remembering, still bearing witness. Good. That is all we can do, I think. Bear witness. Remember. Refuse to look away, even when looking is agony. Sarah squeezed her hand once, then released it. I brought you something. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a photograph. Keiko recognized it immediately. Herself, Emmy, and Sarah standing together outside the medical tent at Camp Stockton. Below it, a caption, Captain Sarah Mitchell, USA. Keiko Tanaka, Japan. Witness EN Camp Stockton, Texas. August 17th, 1945. When was this taken? August 17th, the day before you escaped. Danny took it. He thought we should have proof that we existed together, that the moment was real. Keiko stared at the photograph, seeing her younger self looking back. That woman had not yet known her father was guilty, had not yet chosen truth over comfort. She was so young, we all were, even me, even though I thought I was old and tired and finished with surprises. They talked for 2 hours trading stories about the years between. Sarah's work with veterans rehabilitation programs, Keiko's career as a midwife. When they finally rose to leave, Keiko felt something settle in her chest, not peace exactly, but something close to it. They walked together to the station. At the platform, they embraced again. Will I see you again? I do not know, but I am glad I saw you now. Glad to know you survived. Glad to know the choice we made mattered. It mattered. More than you know. Sarah boarded her train. Keiko watched it pull away. Then Keiko went home to her husband and children carrying the photograph in her pocket like a talisman. Proof that mercy was possible. That truth could survive alongside love. Tokyo, November 1985. Keiko Tanaka sat on a bench in the Tokyo National Museum, her granddaughter Yuki beside her. At 67, Keiko moved slowly, but her mind remained sharp. The museum had opened a new exhibit 3 months earlier. Voices from Manchuria Civilian Testimonies, 1942 to 1945. They walked through the exhibit slowly. Glass cases held documents, photographs, maps marking villages that no longer existed. And in the center of the main room, a large display case containing a typed list, 317 village names, dated, located, documented. Below it, a small placard, testimony of witness International Military Tribunal for the Far East, November 2nd, 1945. Grandmother. How did they remember all of this? Keiko did not answer immediately. Someone wrote them down. Someone who understood that memory is the only thing that stands between the dead and oblivion. They moved to the next display, more documents. And there among the administrative records, a section titled Personnel Involved in Relocation Programs. Keiko's breath caught. Yuki leaned closer, reading. Then she turned to her grandmother, confusion and horror warring in her young face. That name, Tanaka Hiroshi, is that? Yes, that is your great-grandfather. My father. But this says he was involved in... He participated in recording and facilitating the removal of civilians from their homes. Whether he knew what would happen to them, I cannot say. But he was part of the mechanism that made it possible. Yuki sat beside her, struggling to process. Did you know? When you were young, no. I learned the truth after the war ended, after I had returned to Japan and began searching for answers. What did you do? When you found out, Keiko looked at the display case at her father's name preserved forever. I told the truth. I gave his name to the documentation center. I ensured that history would know his role. Yuki's eyes filled with tears. But he was your father. How could you? Because he was my father, I owed him honesty. Not protection, not the comfortable lie that he was simply a victim of circumstances. He made choices. I could either honor those choices by pretending they did not matter, or I could honor the people who suffered because of them by ensuring their suffering was remembered. She reached out and took Yuki's hand. That is what mercy really means. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but the courage to see clearly and speak truthfully, even when the truth destroys the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. They sat in silence for a long moment. Do you hate him? Your father, no. I grieve for him, for the man he might have been if the world had been different, for the choices he faced that I will never fully understand. But I do not hate him. Hate is too simple for something this complex. She stood slowly. Come. There is one more thing I want you to see. They walked to a small alcove near the exit. There in a simple frame hung the photograph. 3 women standing together in the Texas sun. Below it a caption, Captain Sarah Mitchell, USA, Keiko Tanaka, Japan, witness EN Camp Stockton, Texas, August 17, 1945. That is you. You were there. I was there. And that woman saved my life. She also saved the life of the woman who provided this testimony. She risked everything to protect us, even though her own brother had died in a Japanese prison camp. Why? Because she understood something most people never learn. That revenge is easy. That hate is simple. But that mercy, real mercy, requires more courage than violence ever could. Keiko studied the photograph. Grandmother, was it worth it, all of this? The truth, the testimony, the price everyone paid. Keiko looked at the 317 village names displayed across the room. Yes, it was worth it, because the alternative was silence. And silence is just another word for forgetting. And forgetting is just another way of killing them all over again. They walked out of the museum together into the bright Tokyo afternoon. That night in her small apartment, Keiko took out the photograph Sarah had given her 25 years earlier. She looked at it for a long time. Then she wrote a letter. The last one she would ever write. Dear Emmy, I do not know if this address still reaches you. I do not know if you still think of those days in Texas. I visited the museum today. I saw your testimony displayed. 317 villages. You remembered them all. You kept your promise. I also saw my father's name in the records. It still hurts to see it there, but it hurts less than the alternative would have. Sarah wrote to me. She said you were well, that you had found a kind of peace. I hope that is still true. I am 67 years old now. My grandchildren ask me about the war. I tell them the truth. I tell them that mercy is not weakness, that truth is heavier than lies, that we honor the dead not by forgetting what killed them, but by remembering. Thank you for being brave enough to speak. Thank you for carrying those names when no one else would. We survived. That is something. Perhaps it is everything. Keiko, she sealed the letter and addressed it to Sacramento, California, to a woman named Emily Nakano, who had once been Emmy Nakamura. Then Keiko turned off the light and went to bed carrying the photograph with her proof that mercy was possible even in the darkest times. And that choice made 40 years earlier under a relentless August sun still mattered, would always matter, for as long as anyone remembered to tell the story. Epilogue. The letter reached Sacramento 3 weeks later. Emily Nakano read it in the back room of her tailor shop, surrounded by fabric and thread, and the comfortable routine of a life built from careful anonymity. She read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in a box with all the other letters from Keiko. She did not write back. There was nothing left to say that had not already been spoken. Instead, she went back to her work, hemming trousers and adjusting sleeves and existing in the quiet spaces between countries, between identities. But that night before sleeping, she whispered 317 village names into the darkness. The same ritual she had performed every night for 40 years. Liaoyang, Tiling, Fushun, Bengsi, Anshan. She would continue until memory failed or life ended, whichever came first, because someone needed to remember them, and she had promised. In Montana, Sarah Mitchell, now 72 and long retired, received a telegram the same week. Keiko had died peacefully in her sleep. Her family requested no flowers. Donations could be made to the Tokyo War Crimes Documentation Center. Sarah stood in her kitchen, holding the telegram, remembering a young Japanese nurse who had watched her with cautious curiosity across a medical examination in Texas. She walked to her study and opened a drawer. Inside was the photograph. 3 women, standing together. She placed it on her desk where she could see it every day. A reminder that the hardest choices were often the most necessary. And in Tokyo, Yuki Tanaka stood at her grandmother's funeral, listening to relatives speak about the woman who had brought 3,000 babies into the world. No one mentioned Manchuria. No one spoke of the museum exhibit or the testimony. But Yuki knew, and she would remember. The funeral ended, the mourners dispersed, life continued. But in a museum in Tokyo, 317 village names remained on display. And somewhere in California, a woman whispered them into the darkness. And in Montana, a photograph sat on a desk, and the truth endured.